Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Welcome back, everybody. The Bacon and Egg Show, episode number 69.
Nice.
Nice, very nice. We made it this far, huh?
Yeah, it's nice. Nice to make it this far. I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was like, "How y'all been doing that for a while, right?" And at the time, I said, "Yeah, we've done 67 of those things." And it's for the fact that we've stuck with this and we enjoy doing this so much, and we appreciate y'all that tune in every week or however often we get around to filming this thing. And some shows
we kind of operate on our own schedule. Sorry, viewers. Like we don't.
Yeah, I mean, we get there when we get there, but some shows are really, really fun to record, and others are, some are just kind of, there's some good stuff, some bad stuff. Sometimes it's just no good. We got a little bit of in between here today, Kerry. But where do you want to start today?
Oh man, let's let's open up the cup of coffee with a little Austin FC news.
The
season ended for Austin FC, and they definitely didn't make the playoffs. There's Finn. What's going on? Definitely didn't make the playoffs, but there was a little bit of a bright spot this last week. Jan Kolmanic, didn't have a perfect season, but was fairly standout player when he took over for Ben Sweat. They got injured in the first game, I think, and missed the rest of the season. He was on loan from the Slovenian club that he was with, and he's 21 years old, Slovenian international, but really made a name for himself and looked impressive in some spots throughout the season. Was good overall. His loan mood was made permanent, so now he's a permanent Austin FC player through 2024 now is the contract extension. So he's on board permanently. So that's a good, they locked down a player that showed some promise. He's young. You'd think he's only going to get better. And I'm a big fan of the signing. I was a little worried about him maybe not returning because of the loan situation, that maybe his parent club would bring him back. But I guess Austin FC paid the money to bring the guy in permanently. So a little bit of good news there from the club.
Yeah, good start to the show today to be able to discuss something like this. We hadn't had a ton of good news from Austin FC as they wrapped up their season. Like you said, the expectations were, to make the playoffs. The club sort of set that from the start, which was a very high bar. It's
ambitious.
To clear, but the thing about it is that's already one of the best attended clubs in the entire league, and is already considered one of the best environments in the league as well. The supporter section in Q2 is tremendous. Has been tremendous all season long, or was tremendous all season long. I just wanted to mention that because even though this club did have, it's an expansion season, and they did set high expectations. Even though they didn't meet them, I still feel like that this is a club that can achieve some goals here moving forward. And a part of that is when you sign young talent like Kolmanic and you find a way to keep these guys on. And if you see something that you like in a 21-year-old at a position playing mostly left back, that is one of those things where to be able to have that outside under, and not have to worry about who's going to be out there. It's important, and he showed a lot of promise this year, like you said. And anyways, yeah, good signing, and lots of good things to come for this club. I have a feeling we're gonna be pleased with some of the moves that are made and aren't made, perhaps coming up for this club in the off season.
Yeah, the season's going to be kicking off in February.
Quick turnaround.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround because of the World Cup next winter. And so the MLS season's kicking off about a month earlier than it typically would. And so, yeah, we're here November 21st. You talk mid-February, there's going to be a lot of news happening roster-wise, schedule-wise, all kinds of things happening with Austin FC over the coming weeks and coming, next couple months. So we'll be on top of it here. We'll be discussing it all. Just tune in for your Austin FC news. But so we started off with something a little positive there. It's time to
Yeah.
I'm just going to warn our viewers here. It's about to get pretty dark, and it's fall. The time has changed. It gets dark earlier now. You know, the weather's getting colder. It's been a little foggy, a little dreary out. If you suffer from like seasonal affective disorder, or there's things, you want to keep your day bright, you might want to just turn the volume off. Don't turn the show off,
No.
because we want the views, we want, those things, but just a warning, you might want to turn the volume off because it might get a little dark here as we start transitioning into the most talked about subject on this program. And Jay, I'll open this up with the question that we've been asking since we started this show. Is Texas back this week?
Texas, I don't know if this is going to come as a shock to you. Texas is not back.
I don't think Texas is back this week. No.
I don't think that's a shock to any of our highly intelligent viewers. I don't think it's a shock to anybody that has a pulse.
I will say this though, if any of our viewers out there do think Texas is back, leave us a comment.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment on this show page today, or whenever you're watching the show. Leave us a comment on this episode and explain like why you think Texas is back, or if Texas never left.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, since the last time we recorded, been 2 losses. One of them might be the worst loss since
2016.
I was going to say longer than that. I was going to say just in terms of like gut punch, no way in hell you should have lost that way.
Yeah.
I mean, like just the way that to the Kansas game, losing 57-56 there on the 2-point conversion at the end, which was the right call. I mean, they can't give Kansas credit. That's where you go for it. You go for 2 there on the road. And they made it happen with some dude that it was his first game that he'd ever played offense. And it was like his first catch ever. And he got an Applebee's commercial out of it.
Good for him.
Yeah, I mean, why not? And it's actually not
honestly, I'm not being like facetious.
Yeah,
like good for him. Like congratulations to him. What a story.
Exactly. It's not a bad commercial, to be honest, except for the fact that he got it because Kansas beat Texas.
Yeah, I think it is the worst loss. It's honestly the worst loss in my lifetime. I think Route 66, as terrible as it was, this is worse than that. Like that UCLA team that came into Austin was fantastic. That was a really good football team. Did they end up going to the Rose Bowl that year or something? That was the Cade McNown, Skip Hicks. Like that was a really good team that came in and beat Richard Walton and a team that ended up being pretty bad that year. I mean, of course, 66-3 shouldn't have happened, especially coming off of a Big 12 championship year. But you could like almost make it, you can almost justify it a little bit. Like, like I'm doing right now, you can almost justify it where it's like really good team comes in and against a banged up team that Makovic, you could almost make sense of it. To me, like the Rice loss for Makovic in 94 is one that kind of like, that's another one. Like the weather was terrible. And like Makovic said, you just can't beat Rice every year. But like, I honestly think this is the worst loss in my living memory as a Texas fan.
It's bad.
Like,
I mean, and then
even Charlie's loss to Kansas was like on the road. It was like, I don't know. And that one, Texas was only a 23-point favorite for that game, where Texas was 31.5-point favorite at home. In this one, like this one for me is the worst. And the worst part about it for me is like, you could feel it coming. We knew it like on the group text, like something's not right. We have a bad feeling about this. 31.5 points. Come on.
Yeah,
we kind of knew something was coming, and like that, none of it was surprising. When he catches that 2-point conversion, it was like, yeah, knew it.
Which it doesn't. I mean, I would say it doesn't make it that much easier knowing going in that that something like that's going to happen, you know. But it's just one of those things that now that's like the forever, like, so that's going to be dragging around behind Sark for the entire time that he's here, however long it is. Like that's a loss that.
That's hard to come back from, man.
Here's the deal. We've heard, and we haven't even gotten into this West Virginia loss.
Do we have to?
No, I don't think we do, to be honest. But when you're this far gone, and I truly feel like that he had already decided that he's going to play out this season a certain way. Really, just if this is what happens, this is what happens. And then as soon as he starts to get these recruits on campus and immediately start to plug some of them in, I feel like he knows that he has certain pieces on this roster that can, if they're put in the positions, they can be successful. But you got a lot of seniors on this team. You got a lot of 5th-year, 6th-year seniors on this team that sort of have earned, you know, in a college football head coach's mind, because they've been a part of a program for that long. It's almost like in their heads, they feel like they've earned that playing time and they have to be on the field. And for me, I'm trying to make sense of this, I guess, Kerry, is what I'm trying to do here, because there's still some players that are on the field regularly that the product that we're seeing from them is not worthy of playing time at all. And
No,
that's the frustrating part to me about this, is I'm trying to make sense of why some of these guys continue to see playing time when their level is below contributing what an average contributor would give to a roster. It doesn't make sense to me. And
yeah, you know, there's the whole thing, like there's always, the truth always is somewhere in between, right? Like it's either the coaches are extremely overrating the players that are consistently out on the field, or perhaps we're overrating the players that are behind them on the depth chart, you know, and thinking that the players behind them are any better based on maybe flashes or recruiting ranking or name or anything like that. And maybe, again, maybe it's somewhere in between. Maybe, you know, it's like the whole thing about the backup quarterbacks. Like the most popular guy in town is always the backup quarterback. And you think, oh, the backup quarterbacks can come in and save everything. But then he comes in and more often than not, you realize why they're the backup quarterback. And I wonder if we're kind of on that with some of these players. You know, we mentioned, you know, I mean, we can go down a whole list of players that we're like, what are they still doing out there? But maybe the guys behind them just aren't any better. Maybe their attitude isn't right. Maybe they're just not any good. I mean, we think about the first name that comes to mind, like Tyler Johnson, came in as a 5-star, you know, offensive line recruit. Guy hadn't even been on the depth chart. Like and this isn't like a true freshman season for him or something. There's no injury issues, any of those things. Like that's one of those ones. Why isn't he playing, man? That's a 5-star guy that should come in and be able to do some work. Maybe he's just not any good. Maybe he just doesn't care. Maybe he just doesn't want to play. There's a lot of reasons we probably don't know why the coaches don't even bother having that guy on the depth chart coming in a, you know, an injury issue or rotation issue, anything like that. I agree. Like the players that are out there shouldn't be out there the amount that they are. But maybe that's me this conversation is me trying to justify why we're not seeing the changes. So maybe they're just not any good. And maybe they're,
very
you know,
possible.
And maybe that's, you know, again, a recruiting pitch for Sark is like, you know, hey, you want to come in and start at linebacker as a true freshman?
Yeah.
And you can beat out the guy that's starting, and you're not going to have any issue beating out the guys behind you in the 2 and 3 deep. You know, and I know it's kind of from the Tom Herman school of recruiting, of like showing video of, you know, the current squad saying like, look at how much these guys suck. But like, you know, I hope Sark has a little more tact and
yeah,
gently can say that a little bit better than Tommy. But like, That's still a recruiting pitch though. As much as like, you don't want to bag on the players that are on campus, but watch the film. How can recruits not see, like, how can the coaches not show these guys like, look, this is the scheme we're putting together, but look at these guys just not execute it or not have the ability to execute it. You can execute it. And when you get on campus this spring or in the summer, you're going to start because we're tearing this thing all the way down to the tax. So I don't know. So to your point, there's a lot of players that shouldn't be out on that field. We don't see the effort, we don't see the talent or the execution, all those things. But I mean, maybe we're guilty a little bit of thinking that the guys behind them are any better. And that, I think, says a lot about where this roster is. And it ain't good.
Yeah. It's not good at all. Like, we're going to talk about a Runnin Horns team in a little bit that has a ton of depth and a
Hey,
ton of
we're not,
guys.
hold on. Don't start pulling us out of this black hole yet, Jay.
Hold on, hold on.
Don't give
But
people this glimmer of light because we're not done yet. We're
no, we're
not done
not.
with the football team yet.
It's the opposite of that. It's the opposite of what we're going to talk about later. Because you're right that maybe it's just for the sake of wanting to see what is not, is the grass greener, is the, wanting to see what we don't know, what's the unknown there.
Right.
And but it also, like, if they would have been, I feel like if they were that much better, I think you're probably right. Like, they got a lot of these guys would have been playing already, but maybe not. It's just a matter of, I just feel like we could see some more. But honestly, like, where, like talk about the offensive line, okay, which is not, we would have hoped as the season has progressed that they would have learned how to play together a little bit and gelled a little bit and formed some sort of continuity and consistency. And they've been absolutely the opposite of that.
Well,
It just seems like they just.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that because as we talk about this roster, and we talk about the deficiencies, we talk about the talent, like we talk about the roster. I think you're making a good point there because this coaching staff should not be let off the hook either. And that's where I think people are using like a lot of absolutes when talking about this football team and this season and where it goes. And it's like, on one side, you have the crowd that's like, oh, the roster's just terrible. And it's all the roster. That's all that it is to explain for these losses. Then you have the other side that's like, losing to Kansas and losing 6 in a row is inexcusable. It's absolutely the coaches. It's not, there's talent on this roster. It's just not being utilized. Fire the whole staff. And both of those sides have points. But again, the truth is like, it kind of is in between there. And there's enough criticism. You mentioned it just now on the offensive line. That fact alone, talent aside, that fact alone that they haven't shown any kind of cohesion, there's been no development. There's been no kind of like, oh, they're starting to look like more of a consistent unit because they've stayed pretty healthy all year. This isn't because of like, oh, well, 3 guys have went out hurt. Now they've got to like plug pieces in and they just can't get it together each week. This has been pretty much the same unit all season. And if you can't take, this group, and I know they're not very good, but at least make them look better than they looked earlier in the season. That's on the coaches. Like, that's on Kyle Flood for me.
I think that there's just a fine line there between what we've seen out of these players since they've gotten onto campus or lack thereof, and expecting a first-year coach working with them for the first time to be able to break them of all of their bad habits that they've either developed or been coached. I think that we can talk about this from a lot of different perspectives, but the point remains the same, that the
Yeah.
end result is
Right.
a football program that's in disarray, and a football coach in his first year that's dealing with the worst losing streak in 50 something years, so
1956. Yeah.
so how, well, no, it's 760
65.
40 60 whatever it is.
Yeah.
He's in the midst of this and trying to figure out, like, okay, is this plan that I've laid out for the next couple of years, is this still going to be the way that I make this my program and become successful here? Or is Sark sitting there thinking, like, we didn't realize how bad of a situation we were coming into, and the way that we do things is not what these kids are used to here, and that is reflected by the play on the field, and we're having to, like the true freshman wide receiver that's going to be first team all conference is the shining example of getting somebody in here that didn't have any other ties to any other coaching
Yeah.
staffs.
He's the only one. He's been
And
the best player this season.
and he's been the best player all season long, game in and game out. Bijan aside, just
I
being
think he's been
Bijan
better than
Robinson. But I feel like Bijan is. I think you can make an argument either way there. The point is
Well, I mean, just in terms of like production numbers, those
Yeah,
things. We
agreed.
haven't seen the the true Bijan, because there's been factors out of his control that
Yeah.
haven't allowed that to happen. But
the point is he has, without any other ties to any other coaching staff, been able to come in and learn how to be the player that Steve Sarkisian wants him to be in his program, and not have anything else. If we start to see some of these guys that can come in and contribute immediately, and you get a feeling for, okay, they want to be coached a certain way, they want to win, and they know what's going to come from that, and how you're going to have to be coached in order to be successful. And if you can come in and be a part of that immediately, like you said earlier, that's appealing to a lot of these guys. We haven't seen much of a hit taken on the recruiting trail because of this stuff. These recruits are seeing this and thinking, okay, like, this is legitimately my opportunity to go in and be the change, make the changes that need to be made at this football program. And I can do that immediately. So it hasn't affected the recruiting trail that much. And in fact, some of these guys seem to be really digging in on the fact that they're recruited at Texas and still trying to come through, with that, playing that Pied Piper role.
well, I think that's a good
And we
sign.
just have
I
to
think
see
that's
if
a good.
Steve Sarkisian is going to be able to keep his, execute his plan with the guys that he's bringing on. And like you were saying, like, I think that's obviously a good sign.
Well, it's a good sign for like the mental factor. Like, it's a good sign for, like, if the players are able to hang strong through this as recruits, like, they're obviously going to be coming in with kind of the right mentality for a rebuild. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, if a player decommits right now, okay, that's fine. That's probably the type of player that wants to go in and win immediately, which, I mean, who wouldn't want to win immediately? But it's, that also could be a player that transfers out after a season when things aren't going the right way. Like, the fact that these players are like, no, we're coming in to rebuild this thing, make it in our own image. And like, that's a good sign. And we mentioned this on the group text. This team is now not going to go to a bowl game. They're, it's, there's one game left in the season, but that's going to, whatever. They're not going to go to a bowl. And I actually think that's kind of a good thing for this situation, for this season, because there's a lot of players on this roster that are going to be heading out, that are going to be going to the portal. It's going to be, and we'll start getting into our glimmer of sunlight here. This is where we start coming out of the darkness today on this show. And that the quicker that Sark can get that going, the better. And as soon as that K-State game ends next week, you're going to already start hearing about guarantee by the end of that weekend, you're going to hear a ton about players that have opted to go to the portal, all those things. The reason the bowl game thing, you don't want to keep guys around in a program any longer than you really have to if you already know they're on the way out. And I know the extra practices and all that kind of stuff, but if the roster is going to be turning over as much as it is, what are the extra I mean, big deal. What do you?
Yeah,
you
especially
need,
especially with this team. Extra practices for what? For some of these guys to continue to take reps, meaningless reps,
right?
On their way out of town, like it's there's been talk about, oh well, even if you get 5 wins, you could get invited to a bowl game, and that would be great because Texas needs us. No, they don't. I don't think. Just get it over with. Just
get it over with.
Can we end this season as quickly as possible? Just start that. We might hear. Like guys might already Friday night,
right?
Be talking. There might get things that are, hey, thank you, Texas fans. I'm entering the portal, blah blah blah. Like it might happen as, with the way that players have been walking off the field and stuff like that. It might happen in the middle of the game. We might get a tweet, thanking and not return. Like, would it surprise anybody, honestly, at this point, if something like that happened? So. Yeah, man, let's dig out of this darkness here.
Let's get, now we can get out of the black hole.
Yeah, let's get out of this black hole and get to something a little bit shinier.
And it's a good transition here because what have we been talking about with Chris Beard in this basketball program and how he built this roster, and it's through the portal. And that's the approach Sark needs to take this offseason. He needs to go Chris Beard on Friday afternoon, right after that game is over, and start, honestly, like he needs to spend these next few months hammering away at the portal. The recruiting thing is one side of the class coming in, but the portal is going to be crucial for Sark. And that's where, God, Chris Beard, he's can't help but be impressed. I know, we hadn't had a chance to discuss the Gonzaga loss. I don't know how much there is to, besides them. They put up a good fight on the road. There's no shame in that. And they looked like a team that's trying to figure it out and learn how to play together, but the effort's there. You can see the talent. There's no shame in going into a really, really tough environment, the number 1 team in the country. And, they didn't fold. And that's what, that's all I honestly cared about, was wanted to see how they responded to getting punched in the face, and they hung in there.
Yeah.
They stayed in the fight, and that's all, but since then, had a couple non-conference home games, Northern Colorado, which I just want to mention this one real quick because I don't have the number in front of me. Texas had a big lead in the first half. I think they ended up winning by like 16 or 18, something like that. I forget. I should have had that number pulled up. Let me actually find that real quick. But they, I wanted to mention that because of a quote Chris Beard had after the game. 13-point lead, 62-49. Texas had a 37-15 lead in the first half. Northern Colorado then outscored Texas 34-25 in the second half. And what I really enjoyed about that was after the game, Chris Beard was not pleased. 13-point win early in the season, you would think is a, good way to get, keep things rolling. But I love what Chris Beard said about, we got beat in the second half. We lost the second half, and that's unacceptable. Just the way that he's continuing to keep these guys focused. Okay, you jumped out to a 22-point lead in the first half, but Northern Colorado beat you by 9 in the second half. That can't happen. And what do? They turn around and did what they did against San Jose State the following game, which you were at. You were able to see that in person. What'd you take from that? How did they respond to losing a second half against Northern Colorado? And then how did they respond?
Yeah, it's so apparent that the defensive intensity is no longer optional for anyone. And that includes, Marcus Carr, doesn't matter. Like there's an expectation of what type of defense you're going to play while you're on the floor. And if you're not meeting that expectations, you will be subbed out. It was a point where I could hear Chris Beard. I could hear Chris Beard hollering that there was a screen coming to Marcus Carr, letting him know that there was a screen coming his way because they knew the play, they knew what was coming. It was like a set play. Marcus Carr didn't fight over that screen. He got underneath it and gave up a 3-pointer. And Devin Askew was off the bench immediately, and he was coming in for Carr because he was not meeting the expectation that was set. And he had the warning from the coach too, and still gave up the 3-point shot.
Right.
Chris Beard is not going to hesitate to put people on the floor that are going to execute the way that he wants them to execute. And that was the biggest thing for me, was noticing that the defensive intensity on the whole was so impressive. Forced 18 turnovers in the first half. I mean, their hands are everywhere. And you mentioned this before, just how long they are. The length of this team is just out of this world, which obviously can help out tremendously when you're talking about things like steals, deflections, forced and turnovers, to making good, what looks like it's going to be a good shot into tough shots for an opposing shooter. So, I mean, it's impressive to watch, man. And once this offense once they figure each other out, I texted early in the game, like, Timmy Allen is so good. Like, he is that dude, and he's just impressive to watch play. Trey Mitchell had a good night again. Andrew Jones is he's one of the best players in the conference easily on any given night. And he's just going to be a guy that every night is going to be in double figures for this team.
Well, we're starting to see game by game different guys be.
Yep.
You're starting to see different players. I don't want to say step up, but like.
No, but
we're starting to have these conversations. Yeah. You mentioned like Timmy Allen. He led the team in scoring with 17. This was kind of his breakout game, if you will, early in the season. You mentioned Trey Mitchell, who had his kind of breakout game. Was it the Northern Colorado game, getting the start and just kind of leading the way. I'm looking at the box score for the San Jose State game. I mean, like, Marcus Carr only had 2 points.
Right.
He had 4 assists, but like he only had 2 points.
Best night.
Wasn't his best night. But like
matter.
You're starting to see each player kind of have their night. And that's what's going to be so crucial for this team, because especially as the real starting rotation starts to come together, and there's going to be nights where Timmy Allen's off. There's going to be nights where Trey Mitchell's off, or Ramey or Carr. I mean, any of these guys might go cold, Andrew Jones. And the fact that you're having guys step up. And I think that plays a lot to what you were saying with Chris Beard. Like, he seems very in tune with where a player's head's at in a certain time, when to get him off the court. He's not going to let him linger. It's not like, is he quite all there? Is he focused right now in this moment? Like you mentioned with the Carr and Askew thing. Quick hook, get him on the bench, get his head right, get back in.
Yep.
And it's nice having a player on the bench that's hungry and talented enough, that is ready at a moment's notice to go in and step into that role like Askew did for Carr. And it's a luxury. But you don't feel obligated to keep Carr on the court, because it's not a case of like, who am I going to put in?
Yeah.
I got to leave him out there. I know his head's not right. He's not listening or whatever. The effort's not quite there right now. Like, but who do I sub in? Any of these guys are interchangeable at this point. Any of them.
Yep. And when you see the rotation is, it's basically 8 guys, 9 guys including Cunningham. Like, it's basically a 9-guy rotation that we see. And the subs, I think, have slowed a little bit in terms of from that opening night, where it was just, we felt like every whistle almost there were subs being made. But they're still very purposeful. There's reasons. It's not just subbing for the sake of subbing. And you can almost tell, okay, those three guys stood around on that position. I need three new guys in
Yep.
there. They're obviously not right. Or the defensive lapse that Carr had, boom, pull him out, and you know why he's getting subbed out. It's very intentional. The coaching is intentional. It's meant to have you in a certain space, and like you said, if you're not there, Beard is not going to put up with. Now, a lot of guys played 20 minutes last night. Bishop had 20 minutes. Askew played 20 minutes. I'm wanting to ask you to look for his shot just once or twice a game, where I feel like he's just hesitant to even look for his own shot at times.
Yeah,
I would
that's
like
what I'm
to see
looking.
a little more.
What he only put up one shot. He went 0 for 1. It looks like.
I want him to, but again, like he tied for the team lead in assists with Carr.
Yeah.
So Carr was still distributing the ball even on an off night for him. But Askew, Andrew Jones 23 minutes, Carr still played 23, Remy 26, Mitchell 22, Timmy Allen 24. They were able to spread those minutes around in these early season games. It's important because as conference play gets closer, we're going to see that rotation and those minutes divvied up in even smaller increments.
Right.
Tristan Lacone is not going to be getting 7-8 minutes in conference play. I mean, if he is,
and Jace Feverson going to be held to only 13.
Exactly. Right. So, I mean, like there's this, we're going to see these start to shrink down as we get closer and closer to conference play, and who's going to, I think we have a pretty good idea of who these guys are going to be. But like we mentioned in the preview show, and I've mentioned before, any given night, somebody new is going to step up. I mean, Brock Cunningham had 10 points last night.
Hey man, that's 10 times his average points per game.
That's the deal. Just find ways to get different people involved.
Well, and this is when you do it.
Exactly.
And that's when you get some guys some confidence, whether it is, Brock's going to he's going to get some key minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, at least getting him like, where he's putting the ball in, he's getting some points where there might be some situations later in the season where, you might need to lean on Brock Cunningham offensively a little bit and have to say like, you can't just be a complete, like, it can't just be 5-on-4 offensively. Like we need you to do something offensively. And this is where you can build that confidence a bit. And that's where getting him those minutes is great. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at like Avery Benson and Tristan Lacone are not going to get, Benson probably more so than Lacone. I don't see Lacone getting a ton of run when conference play starts. Benson might get a few minutes as a, real glue guy, enforcer type like Cunningham. But other than that, he's not an offensive. He's not going to, you need to rely on him to get you anything.
No, but there's going to be, we haven't even talked about Dylan Disu, who hasn't suited up yet. And there will be minutes for Dylan Disu. I promise you that much. So again, we're going to see how this is going to be already a test of Chris Beard's coaching and roster management when the player of that caliber comes back and starts to see minutes again. It's going to be, I'm looking forward to seeing how Beard manages this roster as the season progresses. There's still some games coming up here, Kerry, where there's plenty of time to get.
Oh yeah,
that Seton Hall test on December 9th. They're a good club. That'll be a good road matchup. But
you got three games coming up. Over the next 2 weeks. Cal Baptist in town Wednesday night. That should be, again, a heavy rotation, just like we're talking about. This should fit the script of what we've seen so far for home non-conference like rotation and what we're going to see. Sam Houston on the 29th. That'll be a fun one. That's at Gregory Gymnasium, a student only admission game for that. That'll be a cool environment. And
for sure,
that'll be fun. But like UTRGV on December 3rd, I mention these because then it's that trip to see, go play Seton Hall in New Jersey. And that's going to be a good test. That's going to be a pretty good test, I think, for this team. But this is also another one of like, okay, how did you play Gonzaga? And what kind of response? What did you see there? This is going to be that kind of like, what lessons did you take from that And I'm sure Chris Beard will be coaching it this way. Okay, well, here's test number 2. We kind of measured what things look like with Gonzaga. Now go beat Seton Hall. And yeah, I mean, the schedule, for year one, I mean, yeah, a lot of these names aren't big ticket attractions. They don't get you too excited, but it's at the same time, this is pretty good for year one and for a coach to be able to like, okay, here's some home non-conference games against opponents you should handle easily, get your rotation, learn about your team. Then you go on the road for a test. Then you come back home and repeat the cycle. And yeah, because after the Seton Hall game, I mean, it's, Arkansas Pine Bluff, then a trip to Vegas to go play Stanford in a Pac-12 challenge, but like Rice, Incarnate Word, and then league play starts. So you kind of get this little bit of a cycle to see what your team looks like and how they respond to some tests after studying, so to say. So it's
a good schedule to get fat on,
yeah,
but also to learn about yourselves. It's we've talked about this. It's really set up really nicely for this roster to learn enough about themselves going into conference play to be confident when it really starts to matter and you need to step up your game.
Yeah.
New Year's Day opening up the conference against home against West Virginia.
Yeah, because the league play doesn't give you any breaks, not in this conference. And that's what you get your breaks now during this, where you can learn about the roster and not, you can rotate, because we talked about this last year and we've been on this show a lot about Big 12 conference is not merciful schedule wise.
No, it's still
even the bad teams in this league. You go on the road there, like
especially on the road. Yeah,
you can lose to the bad teams in this league.
Yeah. So I mean, even after conference play gets started, the one non-conference game in the middle of all that is Rick Barnes coming back to Austin for that SEC Big 12 challenge that they do. And right now they're a top 25 ranked team as they sit. So this is going to be we keep looking forward to like, okay, let's get to conference play. Like we want to see this team grow and want to see it, gel. But really, I'm anxious just to get to conference play to see how this team's going to look. So a few games before that, obviously, to get warmed up. But I think you got to really like where this team is headed. I'd like, hopefully they hit the 3 a little bit better in some of these games. I feel like that's going to be maybe a downfall of this team at some point in the season, is not shooting well from 3.
I was going to mention that because I was looking at those numbers from San Jose State, 4 for 16 from 3, 25% on the night. I mean, 1 for 7 in the second half. And I know, they were up 30 at half. You go, all right. But that could be an issue. I don't know. It's the thing is it's going to happen. Like it's just, it's going to happen. I mean, but it's also like, that's on the coaching staff to know, like, okay, guys aren't hitting these shots. We need to adjust here and utilize this length and athleticism to get down low and get buckets in the paint. Adjust your game. And there were times, previous years where that just didn't happen. And that's what, you're going to go cold.
Yeah, it's going to happen
to every team.
Yeah. So, well, we'll see. It's good, looking good so far. They look good yet last night. Good victory for the Runnin Horns and Chris Beard. See if they can keep it going. Before we go out, we need to cut it here pretty quick. But just wanted to mention Lady Longhorns, the Texas women's team, with a big win at Stanford,
defending national champion.
Stanford. Stanford. Vic Schaefer has that club playing at top level right now, and that's going to be a fun journey to follow as well, because he was one of those coaching hires that Chris Del Conte made that you're like, okay, he's not kidding when he says that he's going to bring in the best coaches and expect to compete in the top 10, because Vic Schaefer was is held in that regard, and he's showing his worth already early
God.
on in his tenure. So, but not just on the court, but on the recruiting trail as well. So I know we just wanted to, before we cut out, I
Yeah.
just wanted to
Good
make
shout
sure
there.
that we mentioned that, because and we'll talk a little bit more about them as well as the season goes on. But yeah, man.
Yeah, we'll leave it
I
there.
guess let's leave it
yeah.
there for today.
Sorry for
yeah,
the darkness in the middle there, everybody. We tried to
It's gonna happen, you know. It's
Yeah.
bound to happen. So.
only one more week of it before it's
Yeah.
mercifully over.
Yeah, and then we're
So,
moving on. Put this
yeah.
one behind us. So
all positive
All right,
sports
everybody.
experiences.
yeah,
All right.
PSEs. Let's do it all. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Welcome,
See y'all.
baby.
See ya.
ATX represent. Fatal, baby.